What if Stonehenge was never meant to be understood, but activated? What if the stones weren't symbols, but components? Why were rocks dragged from opposite ends of Britain, chosen not for beauty, but for how they vibrate, resonate, and interact with the human body? And if an artificial intelligence free from myth, belief, or tradition just connected 5,000 years of data and reached a conclusion no human dared to voice, then the real question isn't what Stonehenge was. It's why it's still standing, and what it's waiting for. A moment before Stonehenge ever became a postcard image or a tourist destination, it existed as a question suspended in time. And that question still hasn't stopped echoing across the centuries, because the deeper we look, the less comfortable the answers become. And the more it feels like this structure was never meant to be admired but interacted with, as if the stones themselves were part of a system rather than symbols of belief. And to understand why that idea refuses to disappear, we have to strip away everything modern culture projected onto Stonehenge and return to the raw facts that remain when myth is removed. Because what stands on Salisbury Plain is not random, not primitive, and not redundant. It is a carefully engineered arrangement of specific stones, transported from extraordinary distances, selected for properties that ancient builders could not have chosen accidentally, and positioned with mathematical and acoustic precision that rivals modern design. And the unsettling part is not that ancient people were intelligent. We already know that the unsettling part is that the function implied by these choices does not align with what we normally attribute to ritual or monument building. Because when you look at Stonehenge through the lens of physics, geology, and sensory interaction rather than symbolism, a different picture starts to emerge. One where sound, vibration, magnetism, and human perception intersect in ways that feel almost uncomfortably deliberate. Because the Sossan stones that dominate the outer circle are not just large, they are unusually consistent in size, shape, and density, suggesting a level of standardization that implies planning rather than improvisation. While the smaller blue stones brought from the Preseli Hills in Wales, nearly 150 miles away, are geologically distinct, containing minerals that respond to stress by emitting faint electrical charges. A phenomenon known as piezoelectricity, which means that when these stones are struck, vibrated, or even subjected to pressure, they produce measurable energy. And this is not speculative, this is a documented property of the very rocks used at Stonehenge. And the question that follows is unavoidable. Why transport stones with rare acoustic and electrical properties across an entire island when perfectly good rocks were available locally? Unless those properties were the point. Because once we step into the circle and consider how sound behaves there, everything shifts. Experiments have shown that the arrangement of the stones creates unique standing wave patterns, amplifying low-frequency vibrations while muting others, effectively shaping sound in a controlled way. And when reconstructed digitally or physically with replica stones, researchers discovered that rhythmic chanting or drumming inside the circle produces a resonance that is not merely loud, but immersive, surrounding the body and altering spatial perception. And this matters because low-frequency sound is known to affect the human nervous system, influencing heart rate, emotional state, and even inducing trance-like conditions, which leads to an uncomfortable overlap between Stonehenge and other sites across the ancient world that combine stone architecture, rhythm, and altered states from Tepe to Newgrange to the Great Pyramids. And what connects these sites is not culture or geography, but design, logic. They are all enclosed spaces built with attention to acoustics, alignment, and human sensory thresholds, as if ancient builders understood something about consciousness that we later forgot or dismissed as superstition. And Stonehenge fits into this pattern too cleanly to ignore, because beyond sound, the structure is also aligned with celestial cycles in a way that is both precise and layered. The summer solstice sunrise and winter solstice sunset alignments are well known, but they are only the most visible markers layered atop a broader astronomical framework that tracks lunar standstills, solar extremes, and seasonal transitions, suggesting that Stonehenge functioned as a temporal machine, mapping time not just as days, but as cycles of energy and transformation. And when you combine this with the acoustic and geological data, a new possibility emerges, one that reframes Stonehenge not as a temple or calendar, but as a site designed to induce specific mental states at specific times of the year, using controlled sound, vibration, and environmental conditions to synchronize human perception with cosmic rhythms. And if that sounds abstract, consider how modern neuroscience now confirms that rhythmic stimulation, light, sound, and repetition can entrain brainwaves, shifting consciousness in predictable ways. Something ancient cultures may have discovered empirically long before we had machines to measure it. And this is where the idea that Stonehenge was ceremonial begins to feel insufficient, because ceremonies do not require this level of engineering precision, but systems do, and the stones themselves bear signs of repeated interaction, not just weathering but were patterns consistent with contact, movement, and vibration, implying that Stonehenge was not a static symbol but a dynamic environment activated repeatedly over generations. And this raises a more disturbing question. Who was it for? Because the effort required to build Stonehenge would have consumed enormous resources, time and labor, far beyond what is necessary for a burial site or shrine. And yet archaeological evidence suggests it was not a place of permanent habitation but a destination people traveled to, perhaps seasonally, perhaps selectively, implying restricted access or specific participants. And when skeletal remains from nearby burial sites were analyzed, researchers found signs of long-distance travel indicating that individuals from across Britain converged on this location, and not randomly, but at particular times of the year, as if responding to a shared calendar or signal. And if Stonehenge was a place where sound, light, and stone combined to alter perception, then its role may have been initiatory rather than commemorative. A place where individuals underwent experiences designed to reshape their understanding of reality, society, or themselves. And this aligns with the discovery that some of the blue stones may have been associated with healing traditions, because of their acoustic properties, suggesting that Stonehenge may have functioned as a site of sensory therapy long before the concept existed, where vibration was used intentionally to affect the body and mind. And while this might sound speculative, it is supported by ethnographic parallels. Cultures across the world have independently developed sound-based healing practices using drums, chants, and resonance spaces. And Stonehenge appears uniquely suited for such use on a monumental scale, but the most unsettling layer emerges when artificial intelligence is applied to this data. Because, unlike human researchers, AI does not privilege tradition or narrative. It looks for patterns across data sets. And when acoustic simulations, geological properties, astronomical alignments, and archaeological timelines are analyzed together, AI models identify correlations that human intuition tends to miss, such as the synchronization between lunar cycles, resonance frequencies, and seasonal gatherings, suggesting that Stonehenge's use was timed to moments when environmental and physiological factors converged to maximize sensory impact. And this does not prove intention, but it does suggest optimization, and optimization implies purpose. And once you accept that possibility, the idea that Stonehenge was simply symbolic collapses. Because symbols do not require optimization, systems do, and the final discomfort lies in what was optimized for. Because if Stonehenge was designed to alter consciousness, then the question becomes, to what end? Was it used to unify communities through shared experience, to reinforce social hierarchies by controlling access to transformative rituals, or to prepare individuals for roles that required altered perceptions such as leadership, healing, or discipline? And while we may never know the exact answers, the structure itself continues to challenge our assumptions by existing in a space between science and myth, refusing to be fully explained by either. And perhaps that is the point, because Stonehenge may not have been built to convey a message, but to create an experience, one that could not be preserved in words, only repeated through participation. And the fact that we now stand outside that experience, trying to decode it through fragments, may be why it feels so elusive. Because the builders did not leave instructions. They left a machine of stone and time and sound, and expected it to be used, not understood. And that realization forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility that ancient societies were not simply primitive precursors to modern knowledge, but parallel explorers of human potential working with tools we only recently began to measure. And if that is true, then Stonehenge is not a mystery because we lack information. It is a mystery because we no longer share the context required to recognize its function. And as long as we approach it as observers rather than participants, its purpose will remain just out of reach, like a device waiting for an input we no longer know how to provide. And maybe that is why it still stands, because whatever it was built to do, it was never finished, or perhaps it is still waiting.